welcome to the Mischa Toland Show. This morning we're going to talk about a topic that is very dear to me, and that's the topic of financial wellness. I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel that with all that has transpired in the last 3, maybe 2 years around money, around the bailout, around Wall Street, around banks and foreclosures, and so many folk being laid off, I really personally feel like God has given us a message to really go inside ourselves and pay attention to what we are doing right and what we could do better. Today's show is going to address that. We have a great guest, but before I introduce my guest, I want to just share with you, this is personal for me because I was raised by a mother and father who pretty much gave my sisters and I anything we wanted. We had no respect or regard for money. And while as a young child, that was fun and it was cute, as I got older, I really had to learn the hard way, y'all, that money does not grow on trees. It does not grow on trees. Money is something that you have to value. You have to develop a personal relationship with money in order to have financial wellness. And so I want to say to you that it's really, really important that, as I had to do, you look at your life, see what you're doing with your money. It was not until after I lost my home to foreclosure that the light bulb went on, and I said to myself, okay, yes, Mischa, this gentleman did do some illegal things, but what were you not doing that you were in a situation where he could even take advantage of you the way that he had to? In addition to that, I was divorcing, and I found myself having to take care of my 2 young sons by myself, which in and of itself was extremely challenging. So I had to really, really figure out what my money blueprint was going to be so that I could have the healthiest lifestyle moving forward. And that's what I hope the information that we will share with you today will help you to do. Again, today my guest is Dr. Robert Gregory. He has a doctorate in financing. He has over 30 years of experience on the subject, and he is the founder of Trinity Financial. I believe that he will really help us because today we're coming from just a little different perspective. We hear people talk about money all the time, from investments to savings. He's going to talk to us today about money from a spiritual perspective. What does God say about how we use our money? Some of us may feel like God has no business in our money. I beg to differ, because guess what? If he didn't give it to us, we wouldn't have it. So I just want us to open up our hearts, open up our ears so that we can hear, and hopefully we can learn something that we may not already know about finances. This is not about putting you on a guilt trip. Let me say that out the gate. It's not about putting you on a guilt trip. It's about you being educated and enlightened, because remember, in order to live our greatest life, we have to live a holistic experience. So I'll be right back with my guest, Dr. Gregory.
I had a heart attack. I used a percentage of my death benefit to pay medical expenses and other bills until I returned to work.
While being treated for cancer, I used my policy to replace my income, pay my mortgage, and take care of my family.
Life changes, often without warning. Get more for your money with a life insurance policy that includes living benefits. Access your death benefit while still alive when you need it most for critical, chronic, and terminal illnesses. Call Ferguson Financial Group for life insurance you don't have to die to use.
Welcome back. I am so excited. I shared with you a few moments ago that my guest today is Dr. Gregory, and he is just a dynamic guy, has done a lot of wonderful things. Again, has over 30 years of experience in the finance world, has a PhD in finance, and just has worked across the spectrum. One of the things I'm particularly excited about is your work from a spiritual perspective. We hear people talk about money from a lot of different angles, but talk to us about why it was important to you to approach finances from a spiritual perspective.
That's a very good question. It took me a long time to grow up. I worked for corporate America for a number of years, and in the financial services business, insurance and banking business. there were a lot of remedies for common folk, so to speak, but they weren't really being satisfied with the products and services from a lot of the large corporate conglomerates. So going back home, where I always lived, in the church, it just made sense because the church was really never served the way, and a lot of times I would get calls from pastors, let's talk about debt financing, let's talk about getting out of debt, what's the best mortgage company, how much money should you have in savings. And a lot of these pastors were really driving faithful stewardship in the church. So I thought that would be a good audience to market to educate them about financial faithful stewardship and the things that they should be doing to be more in control of their finances.
So did you find that church folk were receptive, or did you find them to be a little different than working with people who were outside of church and your other client base?
They were really middle of the road. They were more accepted when we were able to identify Bible verses and the teachings of God in the Bible and backed up by the presence of the ministers and pastors based on delivering the message. So rather than delivering the message to them in the way corporate America markets to church clientele, you have to be a Christian believer yourself and understand what they see, what they read, and what God says they should do. Other than that, they think you're a devil just coming trying to give them a piece of advice in order to take some talents or money off the table.
Got you. I understand from a spiritual perspective, particularly those who from Christian background,
Yes.
the scripture talks about tithing and giving God your first 10%.
Absolutely.
That's one of the ways, the Bible talks about staying out of debt. What would be your advice to that person who's struggling financially with debt and really, really needs to get a handle on things, to get a good footing to begin to rebuild?
Well, for Christian believers, the first place is God. Everything that you need is in God's house. And if you understand His Word, and if you understand and have the strength and the faith and the hope, faith and charity, and understand all the teachings and learnings, that'll give you a strong basis and foundation. But looking at what you just said, I call it expectation, expectation, like an egg.
Okay.
And I'll show that later. I think we discussed
Sure.
in the slide that I prepared for you. And the first egg is a small golden egg, and that's God's 10%.
Okay.
So be faithful to do that. The other egg is a silver
So if I don't
egg.
have any money, if I'm back up against the wall and the bill collectors are calling, you're saying still, y'all hear him? He's saying still find a way to pull the 10% out before you pay anybody.
You got to keep to your faith.
Okay.
Because what we end up doing, we got the 10% to God, 10% to yourself, pay yourself.
Okay.
Then you got the 80% that's left over.
Got you.
Most folks, they'll get the nice house and the car, and that 80 becomes 90, and they give God's what's left over.
Right.
Now, God saves. Why can't we? So give
Say that again.
God saves.
Okay.
Why can't we?
Okay.
So give to Him first. If it wasn't for Him, we wouldn't be here.
This is true.
Give
And
him
if
his
it
10.
wasn't for him, we wouldn't have what we have, right?
right.
Okay, so the first part is giving him his 10%.
Absolutely.
And then what's after that?
Then take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself.
Okay.
Give yourself 10%.
Okay.
That doesn't mean buy a new pair of shoes every day.
Okay.
But, put 10% in the 401k, put 10% in the savings, put
Okay.
10% in the emergency fund, 10% to kind of shelter away for a rainy day.
Okay, and then the other
You learn
80%.
how to live off the rest.
Okay.
Then if you still got money left over, then you can go back, put some more in your savings, give some more to God. There are a lot of folks who end up doing that. But it seems like the philosophy is just a little bit lopsided a lot of times because, once we have that check, we're going to be spent. So we spend first and save last.
Right.
So that's what I try to encourage, the opposite. Save first, spend last.
Is it your conviction that sometimes we find ourselves in financial despair because we may not hold true to what our faith says? And again, this isn't for everybody because everybody's watching is not a Christian, but we all have some spiritual principles that we practice or live by. So for the person who may find themselves in that position, would you say that perhaps it may have been a straying away from the principles that they say they adhere to?
Well, I think if you do research, the best book I've read is the Bible. And pretty much everything is in there. You just have to find it. And it's in there in a way that may not be common as an average reader just reads an average novel. So you have to go through, reinterpret the scriptures. But a lot of times it appears that the habits that we follow are there. And we're not just listening and doing what we're asked to do.
Hold on to that thought. We'll be right back.
Okay, thank you.
I had a heart attack. I used a percentage of my death benefit to pay medical expenses and other bills until I returned to work.
While being treated for cancer, I used my policy to replace my income, pay my mortgage, and take care of my family.
Life changes, often without warning. Get more for your money with a life insurance policy that includes living benefits. Access your death benefit while still alive when you need it most for critical, chronic, and terminal illnesses. Call Ferguson Financial Group for life insurance you don't have to die to use.
And we're back. So I'm going to let you finish that thought about the straying and if that can contribute to debt.
Well, I believe straying from faith certainly does contribute to death. And one of my favorite parables, the parable of the talents, Matthew 25, I think is verse 17 to verse 21 to verse 31. And if you remember, and most of the viewers probably do, I call it 5 to 1. You got 5 talents, 2 talents, 1 talent.
Yes.
And nobody really knew what God wanted them to do. So when you stray from your faith, I mean, God knows the talent that he gave to the servant. Okay. He only needed 1 talent if he did the right thing. Now me, I might need 5 or 6 because it might take me a lot of time to get it right. But when you stray from the faith and you don't make your talents multiply, and all he wanted to do in that 27th verse, he wanted you to put your money with the exchanger so he can live off the interest, what they call usury in the Bible, and that's good, faithful stewardship. So when you stray from it, I mean, you get a lot of talent. You stray from it, you're going to get punished, and then the gashing of the teeth in hell is where everybody went that didn't do the right thing with the parable of the talents.
Okay. Well, I think that really answers that and puts that in a whole nother perspective. So my other question is, have you heard the saying, you either have money and no time to enjoy it, or you have plenty of time and no money? What would you say someone can do to balance the both? And then interpret that saying for us, if you will, for our viewing audience.
Well, Mischa, that is a very tough question. If I had all the money I wanted and no time, I'd probably just invest it in my family, build a legacy, and carry on. But when you're dealing with time and money, one's controllable and the other one's God-given.
Right.
So time is God-given.
Right.
Nobody can control that. Money you can control, but a lot of us don't end up doing the right things with it, or the things that may be faithful steward types of things that enable us to have more enjoyment from it. But yes, I have heard that statement, having a lot of money and not enough time, or vice versa, having a lot of time and not enough money.
And you know what gets me about it? What gets me is that oftentimes people who have a lot of time sometimes are the same people who say they don't have enough money. And the perspective I take from that is, what are you doing with your time?
Absolutely.
Because if we use our time in a way that is fruitful, I believe that the money we can create, the income we can create to be able to get what it is we need to live.
Absolutely. We all heard the statement, you know, if you're 20 years old or 30 or 40 years old, you have a big birthday and it says, oh man, I wish I knew what I know now back then. Because we want that time so we can create better relationships, make better decisions.
Surely.
So yes, and a lot of the young folks, and I would encourage them, you know, it appears, based on the numbers, you have a lot of time on your hand. I mean, you just graduated high school or college and you got your life going on. You got more time than maybe a 75-year-old person does. What are you going to do with it?
Exactly.
How are you going to create some cash? Maybe you need to change jobs and make more money because you got yourself in more debt than you can handle right now. So changing of career is not a bad thing if you're doing it for the right purpose.
Yeah, and so having said that, one of the things I'd like to suggest to those of you who are watching us, if you're finding yourself just laying around, feeling sorry for yourself, you have more bill than money at the end of the month, one of the things you may want to actually consider is, what can I do with this extra time that I have to generate the income that I need? My fundamental belief, Dr. Gregory, is that God has blessed each of us with something we can use to make money.
Yep. The talents, like the parable.
Exactly.
Yes,
I say that wherever I go. And so if you're home and you're just wallowing around about, I don't have no money, I don't have no money, I don't have no money, you want to check in with yourself to see if you're using what God has given you to get what it is you actually need. Another question I have is, you know, there's a lot going on in the world with respect to Wall Street, the bailouts and how that went and what the banks got and what the banks haven't given based on what the government gave them. And you have, people with foreclosures, and the car dealerships were bailed out, but then we said there was nobody on Main Street was bailed out. What's your perspective as someone with 30 years of experience in the financial world? What's your perspective on all of that?
Well, I used to be a banker. That was one of the careers that I had. I was a senior vice president for a bank. I won't call the name, but I enjoyed that time I spent. In the banking industry, which I know a little bit about, what's confusing is you have regulation, then you have deregulation and re-regulation. That's probably in a lot of different industries, but the bank went through a lot of re-regulation. Darn St. Germain's back in 1980, which allows the S&Ls to do commercial lending, and they didn't have the expertise, i.e. the old court banks and the other institutions were kind of going a little backwards and confusing the public. But when you have all this regulation.
Okay, we're going to have to take a break. Hold on to that.
Gotcha.
We're going to come back.
Okay, thank you.
I had a heart attack. I used a percentage of my death benefit to pay medical expenses and other bills until I returned to work.
While being treated for cancer, I used my policy to replace my income, pay my mortgage, and take care of my family.
Life changes, often without warning. Get more for your money with a life insurance policy that includes living benefits. Access your death benefit while still alive when you need it most for critical, chronic, and terminal illnesses. Call Ferguson Financial Group for life insurance you don't have to die to use.
Welcome back. So Dr. Gregory, when we just broke, you were saying that we were talking about the regulations and the bailout. So go ahead and continue to tell us about that.
Yeah, we're talking about regulation, deregulation, re-regulations, kind of chaos there. So the banks had a lot of challenges, and there were some things that happened back in the 80s, and they really got on the ball of being very competitive. But my take of it is a lot of times when an institution has a lot of regulations and deregulations, the customers get confused.
Okay.
So things start to happen for the reasons of the folks who are controlling the product.
Okay.
So let's say the bankers. And to make a long story short, I'm sure we've all had situations where the name of our bank that we used to pay our mortgage to is now XYZ Bank rather than ABC Bank. So there's a lot of buying and selling going on. So if you have regulation and deregulation happening, which is blind to the public, then you have potentially maybe some folks who are looking to make some more money. You might call it greed or whatever else, and the public still doesn't know what's going on. And then you're having nobody, no regulatory authority using all the power that it should use.
And I have to tell you, that really
audit.
Blows my mind.
Yes.
That when you talk about billions upon billions of dollars, there was no regulating going on until the point that it got under control.
Right. Who's watching the hen house? You're right.
Right.
Who's watching the hen house?
Unbelievable.
Do what you want to do, and hopefully everything is good. And while we all making money, everything is fine. But then when you hurt the public so much, I mean, somebody has to come to the rescue. Oops.
I love that segment because that takes me into where I want to go next. You know, one of the things I hope that we all have learned from this experience with the bailout and with the way things have gone awry with respect to Wall Street and the banks and regulations and deregulations and whatever was happening is that we have to take personal responsibility for our finances. We cannot expect that the folk at the bank we bank with or our financial planner or the people we do investment with has to be responsible for our money. Yes, they may know something we don't.
And you said expect. I like that. We can't expect. And one of my cliches I use very often, in life, in finance, family, you get what you inspect, not what you expect.
I love
that. You got to inspect what you do. Put your finger on the pulse. Ask that one question. You know, one of my favorite characters in TV shows years ago was Columbo. Wow. He knew who did it.
Oh, goodness.
But he'd come back. He'd be on your nerves. He'd be, can I just ask you one more question?
He was funny.
Inspect. And before you know it, you're going to find out more what's really going on once you ask that question.
So when we talk about inspect, let's talk about how we can help our viewers to inspect their finances right now.
Right.
To get to a place of wellness, to get to a place of balance and harmony with respect to your money. What is it that you think the general population does not understand about debt, money, finances, how to stay in a good place?
Well, unfortunately, I believe that most of the clients I talk with, they need inspection help. Some of them make very good livings, have good monies, have good assets, but they don't inspect. So just rolling real quick, some of the things that I think the viewers can inspect. Inspect your bank account. Expect your credit card bills. Expect the amount of money that you make on your payroll. You know, when I do tax return analysis for clients, it's like, oh, I have to pay Uncle Sam again. Well, you spent the money. They were only taking 2% out because you claimed 9 exemptions.
Wow.
Didn't you know that when you got your paycheck? You didn't inspect it? Now, since you didn't pay taxes on that money, you have to pay it at the end of the year. So inspect those things. Inspect how much money you make on an average year. Inspect your budget. Inspect the number of outlays of money that you pay for bills or your shopping or leisure or vacation. If you inspect all those things, then you know what's going on. Look, big corporations, the corporations that you probably work for or the ones that you own or have created yourself, it's all about the budget. It's all about the money.
Right.
Is it in the budget?
Right.
Is it not in the budget?
Right.
How much we spend this year? How much we lose this year? If we do that for our personal lives, we'll be in a better place.
Got you. Now, my goal is always to help us to be better, to help us to live out the greatness that is ours, the great lives that God would have us to live out. Want to know from you, what is you think we don't understand about being a good steward of our finances? Overall, what is the biggest misconception, the biggest myth you believe we have with respect to not understanding this idea of stewardship over finances?
Okay, I think there's several, but you want the number one. One would be the overall, and I believe in the documents that I had alluded to earlier.
Yes.
And the viewers may see a slide presentation later on, but if I could, I used to do seminars, and I still do, not as many as I used to, but I had seminars that I would give to churches and women's group and men's group, and we talk about stewardship and have to talk about the concerns of the church and the budget in order to help increase their finances so they can do more things for God. But I develop a PowerPoint presentation that I call my construction blueprint. And one of the things in the construction blueprint is the stewardship blueprint, and basically it refers to people don't plan to fail. Many of us do, but simply we fail to plan. Let's get back to the budget stuff. If you don't know what's going on, if you can't see the numbers, then you're going to go buy that pair of shoes just because you can. But, oh, something else that was due. Or I have an emergency for a family member. So we fail the plan. So that's probably one of the biggest stewardship things that we forget or don't do.
And I've absolutely heard that saying before. I actually have. Okay. All right.
And then the other one is Finance 101. And this is one I think I alluded to earlier, calling it egg expectations. You got 3 eggs. So the gold egg is a 10% to God. That's your tithes and the offering. And the silver egg is the 10% to yourself, savings and investments. And then the 80% is what's left over for living expense. So basically, you got 90% of your income is in your house. The 80 that you're spending and the 10 for your savings. And 10% is in God's house. So that's another thing that I think is a misunderstanding of Finance 101 for faithful stewardship.
So we should not be living off the 100.
Of course not.
Even if you're not a tither, even if you don't have a spiritual grounding, you still should be putting 10% away for yourself, paying yourself first.
Absolutely.
In the name of Finance 101.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
And oh, this one is my favorite.
Okay.
Prayer works.
Uh-oh.
And a quick example, I remember as I was doing estate planning for a lot of folks that were retiring and decided what to do with their 401k, and when they didn't make a decision, they would always say, I'd pray on it. And that was something that I really thought about. I'd come back again and I just give them all the information I can to help them make a decision. Well, Mr. Gregory, let me just pray on it and I'll get back to you. So I created a slide presentation which had prayers go up, blessings come down, and then the person is on the bottom.
Okay.
And prayers without action really never happens in regard to receiving or increasing any blessing. So when a person says they're going to pray on it, that means that I'm going to send it up to the Lord, I'm going to pray on it, I'm not going to think about it, I'm not going to give it any action. But we all heard the jokes and the stories about God, how he delivers his message, and folks who pray are fine. But he can put the answer right in front of you. And without action, without you doing something, you know, the guy on the roof that was drowning and God's in the airplane, he says, go ahead, Tommy, take your boat. I'm good. God said, I sent you the boat.
Scripture says faith without works is dead.
Yes.
So with respect to what you're saying, it's all about praying, but also doing the work.
Action.
So that we can have the kind of life that we want to have.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I love
you very
that
much.
formula. Love the
Thank you very
formula.
much,
Love the
Mischa.
formula. We will be back.
I had a heart attack. I used a percentage of my death benefit to pay medical expenses and other bills until I returned to work.
While being treated for cancer, I used my policy to replace my income, pay my mortgage, and take care of my family.
Life changes, often without warning. Get more for your money with a life insurance policy that includes living benefits. Access your death benefit while still alive when you need it most for critical, chronic, and terminal illnesses. Call Ferguson Financial Group for life insurance you don't have to die to use.
Welcome back. I hope that you have had as enjoyable a time as I have as you listen to Dr. Gregory and all that he had to share with us. I really hope that something he said spoke to you, whether it was simply to confirm that you're doing a great job financially, or whether it was simply for you to say, you know what, there are some things that I can do differently. I really believe that a part of being the best person that we can be, we really have to not just look at emotions and mental and psychological, but that financial part plays a big role in how our lives can roll out successfully. So again, I hope you take something away from this show on financial wellness. Also want to invite you again to visit us at facebook.com/Mischa Toland. Go and like the page, leave your comments about the show, things that you learned about yourself and things that you learned about money. Want to also encourage you to go to our website at www.greatnessnow.org, and then you can also follow us on Twitter. And finally, I want to thank those of you who contributed to our 48-hour fundraising marathon. We are blessed and grateful for every penny, dime, nickel, dollar that we received. I wanted to say thank you so much for that. As we close, remember to tune in next week. Next week, we're going to be talking about physical wellness. Next week, we're going to be talking about physical wellness. This week, we talked about financial wellness. And we're going to look at, again, how taking care of ourselves can help us to live our best life. Remember that greatness is your birthright. Therefore, you need no one's permission or approval to be great. I'll see you next week.